So, again, thank you for the introduction. My name is Tamara. I'm with the Canadian Trucking and Human Resources Council. For those of you who don't know about the Council, I'll just give you a little bit of background. We are a not-for-profit organization, and our mandate is to assist the Canadian trucking industry to recruit, train, and retain human resources necessary to meet their current requirements as well as their long-term requirements. And we do this in a variety of ways. We conduct industry research, like labor market information research, needs assessments, that type of thing. We use this research to develop a variety of HR-related tools for industry, so HR guides, national training programs, national occupational standards, those types of things. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is some research that we're doing on the link between licensing, training, and safety. So the reason that we undertook this survey, or this study in the first place, is we wanted to build a business case for improving training and licensing processes for new drivers of heavy trucks. And we did this because we want to ensure the safety of these drivers as well as the public. So to do this, we wanted to identify relationships among commercial truck driver standards, training programs, licensing programs, as well as the safety performance of new drivers. So we're looking to establish a link between these four factors. And the way that we're going to do this, or that we're currently doing this, is through a cross-sectional retrospective study. So what this means is we're going to be looking backwards in time. So we take a sample of drivers in different study locations who held their license for 6 years or less. So we're looking for new entrants to the industry. And we take a cross-section of those folks and then ask them a variety of questions about their driving behavior in the past 6 years. So since they've been licensed, you know, have you been involved in an accident? Have you been involved in a near miss? You know, was it at fault? These types of things. So in terms of the study layout, the first thing that we did was conducted a literature review, and this was to kind of get a better idea of any existing research out there on this topic, what some of the licensing standards, training programs look like in other jurisdictions. So we looked at Canada, the US, and Australia. And the second task is the cross-sectional survey. Third task is data analysis. So right now, we're in between task 2 and 3. We're still kind of getting some results in from the different jurisdictions, and we're starting to conduct preliminary data analysis on the information that we've got. And I'll talk to you a little bit later about some of the results, the preliminary results that we've got in. Luckily, we've got our results in from Manitoba, which is nice because we're speaking to here from Winnipeg. So, and then finally, we're looking to have our final report. And that's where we hope to be able to build the business case for implementing better licensing standards, better training programs for those who are entering the industry. So in our literature review, there were two main goals in the literature review. First of all, we wanted to look at what is and what isn't known about the characteristics or different contributing factors in terms of collisions of entry-level drivers of large trucks. Second of all, we wanted to determine the extent to which training and licensing processes of large trucks have been shown to actually reduce the risk of collisions. So again, we're looking at the nature of collisions involving new heavy truck drivers. We want to see the safety effectiveness of entry-level licensing procedures. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at current truck driver training and licensing practices in Canada, US, Europe, and Australia. What we did find is that there was actually, especially in Canada, not a lot of research out there in terms of creating a solid link between the type of training that an individual receives and their safety performance after they become a driver. So it's kind of an area where we felt that we're lacking in terms of research. We also found that young drivers, young new drivers, were overrepresented when it came to crashes. So they were involved in crashes more often. And think that was that. So, the study is taking place in 3 jurisdictions, and the reason that we chose these 3 jurisdictions was, first of all, about a year before the study was, a year before the study began, we conducted a feasibility study, and this was just to see which jurisdictions would have the resources to help us collect information at this point in time. And we were looking to provinces that had public insurance because we thought that that would facilitate data gathering in an easier manner. So we're looking at BC, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan right now. And these were the provinces that had, like I said, the ability to assist us with the survey right now. And initially we had also wanted to work with Quebec and Alberta, but at the time there was just a lack of resources and we weren't able to do that as well. But the findings from this survey will be applicable across the country because we're using a large enough sample of drivers. So again, we're going to be comparing the truck driver's safety performance, so things like collisions, violations, that type of thing, since being licensed, and we're looking at Class 1A and Class 3 drivers. And then we're going to be looking at their performance on licensing tests, so their scores, how many times did they have to take the test, so how many attempts. And then we're going to use collision, driver records, insurance claims data, if that information is available to us. We're going to be collecting all of those materials. And then finally, we're actually conducting a survey of truck drivers. So, like I mentioned before, we're taking that same cross-section of drivers and we're actually going to be speaking to them to talk to them about their performance in the past 6 years. So first of all, we want to see if they were involved in any collisions and if they had any convictions after they were licensed. We want to determine whether or not drivers who ended up having 1 or more collisions since being licensed had taken any type of training. And we also are wanting to determine whether or not drivers who had 1 or more collisions were less likely to have performed better on their licensing test. So in terms, again, of scores or how many attempts it took them to pass the test. So in the questionnaire, types of questions that we're asking drivers, the type of training that they took, so where they took it, the duration of the training, what was involved in the training. So we're looking at driver exposure, so distance traveled, collision and violation involvement, and we're asking them questions also about their driving practices, so speeding, seatbelt use, level of fatigue, alcohol use, that type of thing. And also their risk-taking propensity and demographics, so things like age and gender as well. So once we've collected the data on all of these drivers, we're going to take the drivers who've had 1 or more collisions and we're going to compare them with the drivers who haven't had any collisions. And our hypothesis and what we're hoping is that we expect drivers who have a clean driving record to be more likely to have taken training, first of all, and also to have performed better on their licensing test, so their knowledge and their road test, based on their scores and the number of times they took the test. So to analyze the data, we'll be using a number of different statistical processes, so multivariate analysis, and we're making sure to control for confounding factors as well. And we're also going to be looking at fault analyses to determine if one group is more likely to be involved in different types of collisions. So there's a number of different analyses that we're going to be doing on the data that we've collected. So I'll just give you some of the preliminary data that we've got so far. And keep in mind, it's very preliminary. We haven't gotten all the surveys in Manitoba yet. So this is very, just got this information last week, so it is pretty fresh. So the way that we conducted this survey in Manitoba, an invitation letter was initially mailed through Manitoba Public Insurance. So our researchers and our organization, we don't have any information on, or any personal information from the drivers themselves. That was kept with MPI. And there are different options in terms of completing the survey. We're online, through a telephone interview, hard copy through the mail, or through email. So they have four different ways that they can take the survey. So far we've had 1,084 people who've completed the questionnaire, and we're expecting to get a few more in the next couple of weeks. So it'll bump up our numbers a little bit. So these preliminary results are actually based on 931 participants so far. And they're currently holding a Class 1 license or a Class 3 license, and they've held their license for 6 years or less. So again, we're looking at new drivers. 71% of these people currently had a Class 1 license, and 29% had a Class 3 license. And 56% of the Class 1 drivers had taken some type of truck driver training course, and 19% of the Class 3 drivers had taken a truck driver training course. So if we can just look at these numbers here. So first of all, we're looking at crashes, driving a truck since obtaining their license in the first place. So we're looking at folks who passed their road test on the first attempt. So we can see the numbers are actually pretty similar right now through our preliminary analysis. For those who did pass the road test on the first attempt, 86% of them haven't had any crashes. 12% have had one, and 2% have had two or more. If we look to those who didn't pass the road test on their first attempt, we can see that 85% have had no crashes, 11% have had one crash, and 4% have had two or more crashes. And if we look at near-miss crashes for the same factor, so passing the road test on the first attempt, we can see that those people who did pass the road test on the first attempt, 81% have had none, 12% have had one, and 7% have had two or more. If we move over to the no side, we can see 81% had none, 10% had one, and 10% of these folks had two or more near misses while driving a truck in the past year. So if we look to those who have taken an entry-level truck driver training course, so the people who have taken it, 82% of those folks have had no crashes, and 14% have had one, 4% have had two or more. So right now, you can see the way the data is going. It's not supporting our hypothesis, of course, that the training that you take is actually going to have an effect on your safety. But again, keep in mind these are very preliminary results. And so 88% have had no crashes. 10% have had one, and 2% have had two or more. And then if we look at near misses again, if we look at people who have taken an entry-level truck driver training course, 81% of them have had no near misses, 10% have had one, and 9% have had two or more. 80% of those who hadn't taken one have no near misses, 12% have had one, and 8% have had two or more. So those are just a few high-level results from the information that we've gathered so far. We're still conducting data analysis and that type of thing, and we're expecting to get the last few results for Manitoba in the next couple of weeks. The survey itself, we'd like to have all of our data in by the end of July, so we're looking probably the last week of July to finish that type of stuff up. And we're hoping to have our final report produced in August, so I'm thinking mid to late August, when we'll have our final results. So you can go to our website, keep your eyes on our website. We'll be announcing, the results of the survey there. It's www.cthrc.com, or if you want to, you can connect with me afterwards and I can give you my card if you'd like to be notified once we have the final results of the data analysis. And that's everything for me.
Thank you, Sean. Good afternoon, everybody. Very happy to be here today. So want to start off with a slide that some of you may find. This kind of, I think, different people have different perceptions, and actually should have reality in quotes here. One of the things that we're continually challenged with in the truck and bus industry is the majority of the industry is very safe. They do things right, they play by the rules, but the reality is, from a perception standpoint, there's a lot of things that we can't control, and the media takes things and spins things out of control. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about today is the approach that we take at CBSA when we're working on things, whether it's through our committees or through our programs, is let's really, to the extent we're able to, just use the facts, use the data, use what we have to design our policies, our practices, and procedures. In areas that we're not necessarily confident or sure, let's look at ways where we can enhance our knowledge base before we make policy changes or procedural changes to do our business. I have to start out with a couple of slides. This is US-based data, and I have to apologize in advance. Some of these charts are eye charts. You won't be able to see that the clicker doesn't have a laser on it, so I can't point. But the dotted line at the top is the number of registered vehicles. The solid line is the number of fatalities, and the color is the amount of fatal crash rates. So we're having some success in driving down numbers, but we're still not there. Still about 10 to 12% of the fatals in the U.S. are related to large truck bus crashes. However, if you were in my session this morning, I talked about Canada's performance versus other parts of the world, and frankly, when you look at it on a per capita basis, Canada is doing very well. And actually, the U.S. is worse than the average of the developed countries around the world on deaths on a per capita basis. So clearly, we've got some work to do, and I think the other thing that we can take from this is we need to work together. A few words about CBSA. We are a nonprofit, 501c3 in the U.S. It's a certain designation for nonprofit organizations. We were started about 30 years ago by a couple of Western states and Canadian provinces, and really the industry's urging to look at establishing uniformity and reciprocity in how enforcement works, so that there's some level of equity and they know the rules of the game, so to speak. There's a reciprocity agreement across all the North American organizations that deal with commercial truck and bus safety. We have 70 members, and that's every jurisdiction in North America, state, provincial, territorial. We have 500 associate members, the industry and others that really help contribute to our mission. And really, it was in the U.S., what drove it a lot was deregulation back in 1980, where there was a need to really look at safety in a different way and really have a collaborative conversation about how do we advance the ball, so to speak. We're very transparent in what we do. Everything that we do is people can attend our meetings, they can participate in all the conversations, and we rely on that, frankly, to be successful. This is one of the eye charts. The next couple, I'll try not, and I can give this to anybody who's interested. If you can read this, you're definitely better than me. But to describe this is, in the U.S., we have performance data that really gets down to the violation level, particularly different types of violations. And we can track data, for example, the top violation in 2011 for driver-related violations or log violations, form and manner violations. The number of inspections that had that violation cited was 147,324. The number of violations that were cited on those 147,000 inspections were 203,000 and change. The percent of the total driver violations cited across the entire inspection base was 16.91%. Only 228 of those were out of service violations, representing less than 1% of the total. So the reason I bring this to your attention is, again, we've got ways to look at slicing and dicing the performance data that really helps drive what we're doing when we're looking at how we deal with this. On the vehicle side, the top violation there is inoperative lamps that are required. 353,000 of the inspections had that violation or more, one or more, totaling 480,000 violations, 10.2% of the total. 42,000 out of service violations, representing 8.9% of the total vehicle out of service violations. So what does it tell us at a very high level in terms of the prioritization of what the inspection data is showing? Hours of service, not surprisingly, behavioral issues, speed. I didn't talk about speeding and lane changes, but that information showed up in the data. Medical certificate, the driver's not being in possession of medical certificates. Safety belts, we're still having a challenge in the States with drivers using safety belts, although we've had tremendous improvement the last couple of years. Back in 2006, only 48% of truck drivers were wearing safety belts, and last year 78% were. So tremendous improvement, and in part due to the focus on this and seeing the data and really looking at implementing strategies to deal with it. And there is a requirement in the U.S. with English language speaking, and that's showing up in the violation data as well. On the vehicle side, typical lights, tires, brakes, and also cargo security. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about driver stuff and how we are taking what we're doing with that information and how we're implementing strategies to use that data in unique ways to help, again, focus on improving performance. And the reason I showed that grid reality slide at the beginning is the general public thinks all trucks are bad, right? But if you look at the data, that's not necessarily the case. And also when you look at particularly crash, when you get down to the crash level data between large truck and bus related crashes, you find anywhere from 56 to 75% of those crashes are not precipitated by the truck driver, by the four-wheelers, typically. So I think that's one of our challenges in terms of how we're understanding the crash picture and frankly, how we deal with implementing strategies to deal with it. This data was from the large truck crash causation study that was done a couple of years ago in the U.S. Very large study, largest of its kind, $20 million study, looked at 1,000 truck crashes in the U.S. So around that time frame, CBSA implemented what we call our Operation Safe Driver program, and its basic objective is to improve driver performance across all vehicle types, focusing on truck and bus drivers. Obviously, that's who our organization is dealing with, particularly dealing with non-CMEs as well to the extent we're able to, whether it's from an enforcement or an educational perspective. And some of the messaging, making sure that we're focusing on trucks are a big part of the vehicle movements that are going on out there. We need to be cognizant of that and ensuring that we're focusing our attention on those areas as well. These are some of the specific objectives of the program, from increasing traffic enforcement, again, looking at some of the data, speeding and lane changes, those are showing up in the performance data. Non-commercial vehicle, part of this program is really encouraging our members who are the truck and bus folks who's out in the enforcement world, is encouraging them to work with other municipalities to work in enforcement details and blitzes so that they can focus on the cars and our guys focus on the trucks. Increasing safety belt enforcement, driver roadside inspections, and awareness, both for in a number of different ways. I'm going to focus on some of the awareness things we're doing. But before I do that, I want to peel the data back a little bit more in terms of what we've done in terms of the background of designing these programs. And if you look at another aspect from the crash causation study, these types of infractions were from the crash reports from that study, and 6 of the top 7 items that were cited as factors in those crashes are listed there. 6 of the 7 are driver behavioral issues. And what the column that says the number is, that's the aggregate number of crashes where that factor was at play in the crash. The risk ratio is taking a combination of the actual absolute number of crashes and the consequences. So the higher the risk ratio, the more of a risk it is. So one of the things you'll notice in the data, if you look at the cargo ship number, only 6,000 absolute crashes occurred. But when you factor in the consequences of those crashes, the risk ratio moves to the top, or up to the top. And that's because generally the rollovers, things like that, tend to have higher consequence results. And to deal with that, CBSA in combination with Canada has a focused effort on what we call our Park Stream Organization Forum to deal with those types of things. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Another slice of the research, and I heard the woman talk about ATRI, a study done a couple of years ago from the American Transportation Research Institute that looked at driver performance. And what they did is they looked at 540,000 commercial drivers and the way they conducted the study, they looked at the time when they were cited from a roadside inspection standpoint for one of these types of behaviors on the left, reckless driving, improper turns. And what they did is they looked at those drivers with crash rates before that inspection and 12 months after that inspection. And they looked at performance comparing those drivers against the national averages. And what they found is, to read this on the top line, using reckless driving as an example, drivers who were cited with a reckless driving violation were 325% more likely to be in a crash in the next 12 months than the average driver. Pretty powerful stuff. And 540,000 drivers. So you can see the difference. Again, we have specific behaviors. Now we have the ties to future crash involvement. So again, we can look at, okay, how do we deal with the onion bag and look at more strategies to deal with it. To compound this, we did some studies, some research a number of years ago to look at, okay, well, once they get to court, what happens in court? And court decisions and infractions. So the way you look at these slides is, going from left to right. On the left is other than a serious violation, and on the right is disqualifying violations from drivers, and the dispositions that came out of those court actions. And as you go from less severe to more severe the violation, the more likely the driver is to be pled down or some other type of infraction than the original behavior that was cited by the officer roadside. So the previous slide, we've got more serious behavioral issues, more likely we have a crash, and now we have exacerbated the problem that's happening in the court system. So this is a big issue. So what have we done? Through our Operation Safe Driver program, one of the things we've done is design specific, these are some of the advertisements that we developed for the program, looking at specific behavioral issues. The bigger one, if you look on the right, we call it our playbook ad, but it's looking at aggressive driving behaviors. And the other two, one is on speed, the other is on lane changes. So what we've done is try and design specific advertising materials that our members can use. They can take and tailor it to use it for their own jurisdictions, again, based upon what the performance data shows. We've designed these advertisements around their specific behaviors. On the outreach front, we've done a number of different things. There's a couple of examples here. We've developed posters looking at some of the data, brochures, training material. I'll talk a little bit more about the training material in a minute. PSAs, all of this stuff we've developed and is downloadable from our website. So let me step back a minute. Another on the data, and how we're looking at the data. Again, this is a bit of an eye chart, but one of the things we also came across a couple of years ago, looking at youth drivers. And we looked at the crash data, large truck-related crashes between 2003 and 2007, again, right around the time we were launching this program, to look at the representation of youth drivers in large truck-related crashes. What we found, in the large truck-related crashes, 26% of the deaths in those crashes were drivers between the ages of 16 and 25. And that number is pretty consistent over that time period. So a smaller portion of the driving population, but certainly overrepresented in the large truck crashes. So what did that lead us to do? Well, we developed a training program geared specifically towards youth drivers, helping them to understand what's different about a truck, how to operate safely around a truck, and what the consequences are. And this is just a listing of the modules of the training program that was developed. We did this actually through some grant funding supplied by FMCSA, so this information is free for anyone who wants it. Again, it's downloadable from our website. But we've also got a case study in there where we actually have the students work through an actual real-life crash scenario. So it's very, very informative. It's got a lot of different materials with it, but again, focusing on that demographic that frankly, before that date, we knew it was a problem, but now we have data to show. And this is just an example. We did a public outreach event at a local school in the Washington, D.C. area to help promote the program. We got assistance from industry partners there as well. So the other thing that we did, this is last year, part of our Operation Safe Driver program. Distracted driving has become a big issue. Certainly, I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. But in looking at the data and some of the research that's coming out on particularly with trucks, probably the biggest study that has been looked at this on recently that's got gaining a lot of attention is the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute study, they looked at distracted driving behaviors of truck drivers. We found in particular with texting being a big issue with respect to crash risk of those drivers that were texting while driving, having 23 times more likely to be in a crash than normal drivers. And some of the data showing that distracted driving is becoming a growing part of the crash problem, performance problem across not just the U.S., but certainly Canada, across North America. There's a number of strategies that are being looked at and implemented with respect to this. A lot of them are tending to focus on laws. And I think one of the things we've chosen to do is focus on the education side and develop training. So what we did, again, looking at that data and the results, we put together a training program geared specifically for commercial operators. It's called Defeating Distracted Driving, and these are the different modules to provide education for the commercial operators, for the fleets. Again, this is developed and is free of charge to the industry folks. And for enforcement, a lot of what we're trying to do is encourage our members to their DVD kits, to take them when they're going to visit a motor carrier, drop them off to the carrier and say, look, this is yours, use it. We have model policies that are part of the program, and 250 fleets that peer review the whole training program, help contribute to the development of these model policies. So again, as a tool to help industry develop their own policies and deal with it in another educational tool. We've also got a number of other materials associated with it. It's all available in this package. And if you go to our website, our Operation Safe Driver website, you can again download all the materials I talked about, including the training. Here's the website URL there. And what we're focusing on this year's Operation Safe Driver, we're trying to do a training module with each year's program, and FMCSA funds have really helped us on that front to be able to do that. This year we're focusing on teens and distracted driving. That work is going on right now. We do have what we call our electronic toolkit, where a lot of the things I showed, again, I talked about, these are all downloadable. We do have print materials as well. And it's a lot of different things. We encourage industry and our enforcement members to use this stuff, again, as part of their outreach campaigns and their enforcement campaigns as well. We even have some part of the materials we've actually developed some messaging for each of our members, their PIOs, their communications officers, about key things with respect to truck and bus driver performance and safety and driving tips. So next, I want to focus, shifting from the driver to the vehicle side, brakes and our Operation Air Brake program. And actually, Canada launched this program back in 1988. They're credited with helping really get moving on this issue. And frankly, they're doing, in my estimation, a lot. On the vehicle side of things, they're doing a better job than the United States by a long shot. So we can do a better job in running off in Canada, frankly. But I think, again, folks looking at the performance data showing, here's a bit on the data. We have several programs that we do throughout the year. One of them is Operation Air Brake, one of them is Operation Safe Driver, another is Road Check. We collect a lot of data from our members, a lot of enforcement data. And I know it's a pain on them to collect that information, but we use that information in everything that we do. It's very, very important. As you can see here, we track the performance data. And the way I'll read this chart for you is, if you look at the top line, brake adjustment, what these percentages represent are the percent of the total out-of-service violations that were discovered. This is on vehicles during road check. So brake adjustment, braking system being the top ones. So we've done that with Operation Air Brake. Over the last couple of years, we've administered several surveys to drivers to gain the knowledge level of drivers. Now, obviously, I know fleets have different policies with respect to how much they want their drivers to know with respect to brakes and inspection of brakes. But we've been doing that, administering that through our members roadside, and in 2009 in particular, we gathered surveys from 7,500 drivers, looking at basic questions with respect to air brake performance and measurement and inspection. We found that we still have a ways to go with educating drivers. Now again, I know fleets have different policies with respect to this issue, but certainly we were using it as an information gathering tool to help looking at our educational programs. Are we doing the things that we need to do to focus on this issue? If not, what are we doing we need to do a better, not doing we need to do a better job of? In the last couple of years, we've been particularly focused on the brake adjustment issue. In the last 5 years, probably more so than ever. And as you can see on the brake adjustment out of service pieces, in the last couple of years, we've seen a general decline in brake adjustment out of service violations, but an increase on braking system related violations. So again, looking at the data allows you to see those trends and you make adjustments to deal with those trends. So again, a big eye chart with a lot of material. In the middle of this, you see a lot of publications, print materials. We've got ABS, material on ABS, education, brake adjustment. But when we saw the change in the data, one of the things we did last year, in the bottom right corner there, you see it's actually a brake demonstration model that we put together last year. And actually, we take this around to trade shows and we actually make it available to our members and associate members if they want to use it. A lot of them are using it as part of training programs. We can actually, the focus has been on brake adjustment the last couple of years. We've been making real progress. We feel now, looking at the data, we need to shift a little bit more on the system and component side. So we developed this brake demonstration model to educate folks, and we're taking it around trade shows and to help give demonstrations. And again, this is available to folks should they choose. We actually even have engineering drawings that we've developed. So if anyone wants to take those and build one themselves, they can. We also have created a web training tool on brake maintenance and brake adjustment. So we've got some web-based training that's been developed as well. Again, I think part of the strategy here is that people learn differently through different mechanisms. So if we're not constantly evaluating what we're doing and the results of what we're doing, we can't move to the next level. We can't evolve with that type of approach and different strategy. I talked a few minutes ago about cargo securement. This is basically based around the model regulations that were developed in conjunction with Canada and the US years ago. This is an ongoing forum. Cargo securement continues to be a very complicated area of regulation and enforcement and policy. So we have an ongoing forum that we have meet several times a year, and have the regulators, have the enforcers, and have the industry together to talk about this and really look at what the practical application of these things are and how we can design implementation strategies to deal with it. A few other points, I think, though, how we at CBSA are using this performance data to really help us in our decision-making process. I look at electronic onboard recorders. If you go back to some of the driver data I pointed out, the top violation there is form and manner violations. So one of the values or benefits of the implementation of electronic onboard recorders is a more increase in compliance, as long as they're applied and used properly. So again, if you can help deal with those violations and minimize those violations, theoretically you'll improve safety. So one of the purposes we are supporting EOBRs. Speed limiters, again, speed being an issue. As an organization, we haven't taken a policy position on it, but we are having conversations about it. Because again, speed is a top-level safety issue, and we need to ensure that we're staying on top of it. We have a collaboration on safety belt issues with a number of organizations, about 25 organizations in the States, to look at ways we can enhance awareness and enforcement of safety belts, and it's proven results. I've talked about the numbers already. On the vehicle side, one of the things that is driving, looking at the data, we found is there's a lot of quirks in the rules that don't make a lot of sense. So it's driving us to look at the need to modify existing rules to keep pace with current enforcement practices and needs in the field, and training. On the carrier side, imagine everyone in the room is familiar with CSA and safety culture. I talked about this a little bit in the opening session, but one of the other things we've done is as part of our associate members, we have about 300 trucking companies and bus companies that are associate members of CBSA. We looked at their performance data. We just did this not too long ago, about a month ago, and their out-of-service rates on the hazmat side were about 2.5%. Again, this is state-based data. 2.5%, where the industry average is 4%. Their vehicle out-of-service rate is 13%. The industry average is 21%. And the driver out-of-service rate is 1.7%. The industry So what we are doing to help in terms of using that information is to help promote, there's a reason that is the way it is. And it's because these companies take safety very responsibly. It's not a cost, it's an investment to them. So part of what we're using this information to do is, obviously, as representing an enforcement organization, we have to focus on enforcement, and we will continue to do that. But to the extent we can focus and use the data and focusing our efforts on high-risk operators, that's our job, is to get the bad guys off the road. But also on the flip side, to the extent we can use the data and look at the data and promote good practices and best practices, things that people are doing right, and use our opportunity to use the bully pulpit to say these are the things you should be doing because they're providing good results. We have a responsibility to do that as well, because we're a safety organization also. And we're never, as enforcement, we're never going to be able to touch and reach everybody. It's just physically not possible. To the extent we can use this information and look at alternative strategies to promote safe practices and really get opportunities to showcase what's happening, that's part of our responsibility as well. Now, the last slide I'll leave you with, again, another way of looking at the information. We've looked at roadside inspection data, and through some research that was done by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, they've actually done some analysis to show each different type of regulation and linking that to its linkage to crashes. So what we've done is use that information and turn it around to show, okay, what's the benefit of roadside inspections and enforcement activity. And particularly the bottom bullet there, through that analysis, through that work, we've discovered that each roadside inspection is worth $2,414.26 in safety benefits. Clearly, doesn't cost that much to conduct a roadside inspection. So the point of this exercise is there's a huge return on investment that the taxpayer is getting from enforcement activity. And as we're talking to people and legislators and people in the public, often safety is really left as one of the things on the chopping block. And what we need to make sure people understand is if we don't have these types of, or aren't investing in this type of thing, we're not going to